I love swimming. People ask me all the time, what's the number one reason why you won a gold medal? If you could pick one thing that was the absolute number one part of your life that was part of my success, I will tell them passion every single time.
Welcome to Champions Mojo Weekly Podcast with your hosts, Kelly Palace and Maria Parker. You'll hear authentic, entertaining stories with tips, lessons, and wisdom from champions to inspire, motivate, and educate you. You'll get the tools you need for becoming a true champion in your own life. And now, your host, Kelly Palace.
Hello, friends. Welcome to the Champions Mojo Podcast, where I am co-hosting with Maria Parker. Hey, Maria, today's show is going to be a great one. We're going to talk about enthusiasm, and we'll hear an interview with the often enthusiastic, legendary Rowdy Gaines, a three-time Olympic gold medalist in swimming and an ESPN and NBC sports swimming analyst for the last 7 Summer Olympic Games. Would you mind giving us a bit more on Rowdy's stellar career?
Sure, Kelly. It's great to be with you today, and I'm really looking forward to talking about Rowdy's interview on our road trip segment. Even as a non-swimmer, I'm familiar with Rowdy Gaines. I've enjoyed watching him call many swim races on television, known as the voice of swimming and swimming's greatest ambassador. He's described by Michael Phelps as no better person to change the sport of swimming. And in 2015, he won the USA Swimming Award, the most prestigious award one can get for contributions to the sport. Rowdy is a one-of-a-kind champion.
Maria, we could talk about Rowdy's resume all day. He's so accomplished, a 3-time Olympic gold medalist, 12-time U.S. individual national champion. He's held 10 world records. He was an 8-time NCAA champion. He's been inducted into the International Swimming Hall of Fame, the U.S. Olympic Hall of Fame, and Rowdy still swims almost every day. He's an avid U.S. master swimmer, and every October, he hosts a great U.S. master swim meet in Orlando, the Rowdy Gaines Classic. It's in its 11th year. With all that said, his resume won't tell you that he is the nicest, most humble guy you will ever meet. When I got a chance to sit down with Rowdy in Bloomington, Indiana at the Tier Pro Swim Series meet, he was so authentic, funny, and kind. He's just a true treasure to the sport of swimming, and really one of a kind, just like his name.
Yeah, I think our listeners will be able to tell that from his interview. I certainly could. I know one of the many things people love about Rowdy is his enthusiasm. We're going to talk with him about that today and what role he thinks enthusiasm plays in his success, and his answer might surprise you. So without any more delay, let's get to our road trip.
And now it's time for the road trip segment.
Rowdy Gaines, welcome to Champions Mojo.
Thank you, Kelly.
Great to have you here.
Good to be here.
Thank you. So, as we've discussed pre-show, one of the things that so many people love about you is your enthusiasm, not just when you're commentating, but just in life in general. And I did a little research. The word enthusiasm comes from the Greek word meaning possessed by God or having great spirit. And the word rowdy means spirited or loud. So I can't think of a better person and a better name. So what are your thoughts on enthusiasm playing a role in your life?
Well, I think, Kelly, first of all, I have a father who is very much like me. He's very magnanimous when his big personality, very generous, very, very gracious. And I feel like a lot of my personality comes from my father. My mom is much more reserved. But I also have 4 daughters. I have 3 granddaughters. So a lot of the enthusiasm has come from just being around my girls all the time. Plus, I love swimming. People ask me all the time, what's the number one reason why you won a gold medal? If you could pick one thing that was the absolute number one part of your life that was part of my success, I will tell them passion every single time. I know it sounds corny and cliche-ish, but I love swimming. I feel more comfortable in the water than I do on land. That's why I said you have till 1:45 to talk to me, because I've got to be in the water at 1:45. Because I have a meeting at 3 and I've got to get my 45 minutes an hour in the water. So I still swim every day. I don't swim fast anymore, but I still swim every day. And I think the enthusiasm, back to your original question, comes from the passion I have for life, obviously, but certainly for my sport. And I think that's why the whole broadcasting side comes across that way.
So you're swimming almost every day, 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week. What is it like for you? Because I understand as a swimmer, when you say you love swimming, what do you feel like when you're in the water?
Well, I feel, and again, this sounds a little bit corny, but I feel one with the water. You know, I always try to, when I teach swimming and stuff, and I really don't know much about the mechanics of swimming and the technique of swimming. When I do my broadcasting, a lot of it's just because I have that passion that translates to where I'm just fascinated by great swimming. You know, I love fast swimming, whether it comes from an American, which I am a little biased for, obviously, or coming from an international swimmer. I just love fast swimming. Or from a 90-year-old. It doesn't matter. A Masters,
or even an 8-year-old, you told me. Yeah.
It doesn't matter. So I think for me, a lot of what motivates me is to make sure that I try to translate that to people I talk to. I have to be honest with you. The enthusiasm is not there all the time. I crash and burn a lot. You know, when I go home tomorrow from this meet, I turn off. Okay. And sometimes that's tough for my family, because I bring this enthusiasm publicly and then I get tired. Right. It's hard work being on. It's not digging ditches. It's not like rocket science, obviously, but it's you're on, and that takes energy. It takes emotion. It takes a lot of passion to do that. And so sometimes I'm tired. So when I go home, I'm not like this.
So it's kind of almost equates to how a sprinter trains. They train a lot and they rest a lot.
Yeah.
So would you...
Good analogy.
I mean, I can see that, because you do put a lot into that. Are there other places in your life that you have that similar passion that you have
my
for
children,
swimming?
My grandchildren. I certainly think work. I will admit to being a bit of a workaholic. I like being busy. I don't like sedentary time. I don't like doing nothing. Although I just said when I go home, I like to turn off. When I am at home, I do turn off. But when I am out that door, I need to be doing something. I can't stand not being able to do something when I'm outside my door of my home. When I'm at home, I'm pretty good at vegging.
What do you do to relax? Because I know you work really hard. I've been trying to pin you down for this interview for months,
I know.
You're always on the road. What are you doing to relax?
My wife and I are well, I shouldn't want my wife into that. I'm pretty boring when it comes to my home life. I really am. I'm pretty boring when it comes to being on the road, really. I admit to leaving finals last night and going to my hotel room and just watching the 4th and 5th episode of Game of Thrones final season. I don't really have a lot of hobbies, except when it comes to being around my kids and grandkids. I love being around them, which I'm not very much anymore. My kids are grown. My grandkids live in Idaho and I live in Florida, so I don't get a lot of that anymore. But when I do, it brings me real joy. And again, it's a bit cliche-ish, but my family certainly brings me joy. So when we're able to do things together, that's where the enthusiasm comes. We're all going to Hawaii this summer for a week.
Oh, nice.
All 4 of my kids and all 3 of my grandchildren. So 2 of my children were born there. We lived there for 7 years. So
that's right.
That's what I'm enthusiastic about, that trip.
That's beautiful. So what techniques do you feel that you took from your athletic career and transferred into your non-athletic career to be successful? Because you're hugely successful. What techniques do you think you transferred that you learned as an athlete that you're using now?
That's a really good question, Kelly. I think for me, I'm pretty zeroed in on the whole tunnel vision thing. If there's a will, there's a way. So if I really believe in something, if you have this belief that something is of value, you'll figure out how to get it done no matter how difficult the task. You know what I mean? And I did some work with a time management company, 30 years ago, and that's one of the things they teach you is you have to create value for something. So for me, I think that the transfer from swimming, which I was so tunnel vision on becoming an Olympian, as grandiose as that sounds, I really wanted to be able to call myself an Olympian. I had that tunnel vision for the most part. I was never perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I failed miserably many times. But the consistency I had in trying to do what was necessary to become successful, I think has transferred over to my professional life. And I hope to think my personal life, there's ups and downs to both.
Right.
I think I look back and think I wish I would have done things differently sometimes as a husband and as a father and as a son, as a friend and as a business person. But I think overall I just try to be consistent in what I do and my beliefs.
Yes, and one of the things that I see a parallel in your athletic career and your business life, because I don't know your personal life, which seems highly successful, but I loved your book. Rowdy Rising, right?
Yeah,
That's the
Rowdy
title
Rising, yep.
So I didn't know if it was Rising, Rowdy, or Rowdy.
Either one's fine.
Rowdy Rising,
Yeah.
Great book. Literally, I've known you for years and years and years, and I don't even know if you remember that we were on a small little tiny national team together in 1982.
82.
It was just the
Yep.
little Sports Fest, the
Yep.
Olympic Sports Fest.
In Colorado
and Robin
Springs.
Leamy, and
Yep.
so
Bill Bear.
so I've known you for a long time, and even as long as I've known you, reading this book, I learned some really cool things about you and forgot how old you were considered when you won your gold, and that you quit swimming. And listeners, you've got to read this book, whether you're a swimmer or not. We have listeners that are swimmers and non-swimmers, but this is just a great story of how you beat that, that ageism. People thought you were old. And I would love to talk. And now, so paralleling that to your business career.
This will be my eighth Olympics
summer
in Tokyo.
Olympics. Yeah. And that's just amazing. That's 32 years of a career. So kind of like your swimming career continued successfully to the point where, hey, Rowdy may not, and I'm not saying people are saying you're old now. We're laughing at that because I'm feeling old too.
It's
but
okay.
You're still out there just kicking butt, just like you did in swimming. And so that story, can you talk about how you feel like the new swimming age is getting older and maybe business ages are getting older?
Yeah, Summer Sanders and we just talked on the phone for an hour right before I came here. We talked about this exact same subject, about our generation was so much younger, and we were just amazed at Angel Martino making the team in '96 at 27. It was like we felt that was ancient back then. And now the average age is 24, 25 for women, 25, 26 for men. There's a few things that have changed because of that. When we swam, there was no money in swimming.
Right.
We weren't allowed to accept money. It wasn't that there wasn't any money. It was like NCAA type rules. You weren't allowed to take money. So that has changed the sport dramatically, where people can actually earn a living. Most only kind of get by. There are a handful that make good money, but really most just get by as a career, but they can do a career out of swimming.
Right.
And that has changed things a lot. But for me personally, I think from a business standpoint, how it translates from what happened when I swam to all the way now and how it's aged so well for me is the fact that I think it goes back to the enthusiasm. I don't know as much about swimming. When we're speaking specifically about the broadcasting,
Sure.
I don't know as much about swimming as 90% of the people that would like to do this. I mean that. I know the general aspects of swimming. I know technique. I know the people. But you can't deny my passion. And I think especially from the Olympic broadcast side, you're broadcasting to people that have no idea what swimming is. Right. They don't know what the backstroke flags are.
Right.
I get asked the question all the time during the Olympic, what are those flags for? I mean, that's literally who your audience is. There's 25 million people tuning into the Olympics, and 24,900,000 don't know anything about swimming.
Right.
And so I think what you have to do is have that enthusiasm to bring that audience in and care about those athletes. So even as I've aged, it's about caring. It's about the passion. It's like, I care about these kids that swim. I really like them. I've never really met a jerk in swimming.
Isn't that the truth?
There are some, I'm sure.
Yeah.
You know, but I've never met one. And most of them are really, really sweet, humble, gracious people. And even the ones that, you know, you think are standoffish, they're just shy.
Right.
You know, so I've been very fortunate, you know, to call races from not only the greatest athletes in history like Michael and Katie and Missy and people like that, but also get to know them and get to know the fact that they are very, very sweet people. They're good people.
Yeah, and I love to hear you say that your enthusiasm, because it is that. It's contagious. The way that you completely draw people in, and it's the love of watching people swim fast, whether they're 8 or 90. So that is a fantastic.
And that's why I think talking in layman's terms is really important. And sometimes I get criticized by not being more technical and talking about whatever it is that is, you know, tempo and rotation and splits and all that stuff, which are very important to me. The red zone and the blue zone and the... Yes. And all of that's important. And I think I try to do that as much as I can during the general broadcast because I think it's primarily a swimming audience watching. But when the Olympics happen, it's talking about, you know, the tragedy of Molly Hannes losing her father right before she swam, you know, and people care about that. Yes. People empathize with that, or overcoming cancer like Nathan has just done. Yes. I mean, people love the story behind the athlete. They want to get to know this person. That's why they tune in the Olympics. They could care less what their split was at the 50. Yes. They're tuning in because they want to get to know who these people are for a brief 1 week period. Right. You know? Right.
So you have had the chance to be around tons of champions and being a champion yourself, obviously. What common traits have you observed that you would say, for the listeners out there, to be a champion, I think these are the 3 things that champions embody or do?
Well, I think there are so many, and everybody has a different path they follow as far as those kinds of words. But certainly a sense of responsibility was one for me. Once I decided that this was the path I was going to follow as a swimmer, I knew that I had a sense of responsibility to myself to be able to do the right things, which kind of go hand in hand with the dedication and commitment, because our sport demands dedication. You can't go into this half-ass. You just can't do it. It won't work. Long-term. Short-term for some that have the talent, absolutely. But long-term, the effect of not being all in won't work. So, and that's not for the faint of heart. You know? I mean, you can't be a faint of heart to be a swimmer. But I've always worn that as sort of a badge of honor, you know. And for me to have that responsibility of commitment and dedication is certainly one that I again tried to live by consistently. And I think the other, and this might be a little surprising for the average person, but not certainly not a swimmer's, teamwork. I know that, again, is a bit cliche-ish, but I couldn't have done it without the people that I swam with on a daily basis, including my teammates at Auburn, or my teammates on the U.S. national team, or my family. I mean, I won 3 gold medals. I gave them all away. I gave one to my mom, one to my dad, one to my coach. And so the network of support that you have around you makes the sport very much team-oriented, a lot more than the average person thinks. Now, granted, we're the only ones, as you know, that look at the line on the bottom of the pool, and we're kind of a bit of an island most of our training lives. But outside the arena, it's very much you have to have it be like a family. We were interviewing Cody Miller last night after he won the 100 breaststroke, and he talked about the family atmosphere around him, at Indiana, and he graduated several years ago. Yet he has to have that familial feeling of people caring about him.
Yeah, we did a podcast with Michael Andrew and his dad, and you'll notice, because you've interviewed Michael a lot, that he says we. He says, we are swimming the 50 free. We swam the 50 breast, and it is an individual sport, but I think that's a great thing for anybody to take away, whether they're a swimmer or not, that if you're trying to lose weight, or you're trying to write a book, or you need a team. You need a team around you that supports you. Give me one more, Rowdy. One more thing that champions do.
I would think taking risks.
Ooh, I love it.
Because our sport is not for the faint of heart, I think you cannot be afraid to fail. So, I think our sport, again, looking back on it, is so ever-changing. It changes so much year in and year out, from a technique standpoint, from a training standpoint, from a nutrition standpoint, from a tapering standpoint.
Technology.
All these things change. And I think coaches and athletes alike, but especially coaches, they get set in their ways. They've had success one time doing it this way, so they say, it's going to be like this every time then. So I was always very proud of being able to swim with two of the greatest innovators our sport has ever seen, in Eddie Reese and Richard Quick. And both of them never were afraid to fail. They were original. They were leaders. They weren't followers. And just because something worked for me one time in a great taper, Richard was not afraid to take risk and taper me a little differently, or train me a little differently in the water, in the weight room, dry land, whatever it was. It was always something different. And I think those risks that you take also keep the sport fresh, because the sport can be pretty grinding,
Yep.
And so I never knew what to expect when I walked into a practice or walked into a season. And I think taking those risks, calculated, obviously, you don't want to be reckless about it, but taking risks, I think, was something, again, that not many people think of in our sport, but certainly you don't want to be afraid to fail.
Do you think you do that in your business and personal life?
Not as much. I'm a bit of a wimp. I really am. I've always, I work right now for the YMCA, and I love our organization. I love what we do. And on a daily basis, I can't wait to get to work every day. I've had this dream of mine for 20 years to open a swim school. I've always wanted to open my own swim school and teach kids how to swim, especially in that underserved community. And I've never been able to pull the trigger. I've never told anybody that, but I've always been too afraid, to take that risk.
That risk.
Yeah,
right.
Financially,
Sure.
it's a huge risk.
Yeah.
Personally, professionally, I've been wanting to do it for 20 years. So that's an example of professionally, I don't take as many risks as I did certainly in swimming. I take some.
You're
obviously.
still young.
Yeah. Well, having turned 42 just the other day, it was difficult to imagine myself going forward, without taking risk. But I'm joking about turning 42. But just make sure your audience knows that I'm 42.
Yes,
you don't need to edit that.
Okay, we won't edit it. So you led me into just a perfect question, talking about how much swimming changes, because we are on this cusp of pro swimming going really big. I'm so excited personally about the International Swim League and these teams that are going to, pick up pro swimmers and compete. And it just seems like there's a huge horizon. Can you talk about your thoughts on this International Swim League?
Great for the athlete. You couldn't think of a better outlet for the athlete, especially to be able to, from a financial standpoint. That's the big thing. And I don't want to sound crude when I say that, but really it's about money now.
Right.
Because that's how we keep our athletes involved in the sport, so they can financially be able to support themselves. So it's great from a financial standpoint. For it to be successful, though, whether it's ISL or anything else, the Phoenix Championship Series going on right now, the pro swims, it all boils down to television, because that exposure has to be there to a bigger audience. Unless you have somebody that is willing to front it financially, where money is not, where that ability to expose it to a bigger audience is not a big deal. But I think for it to be successful, we have to make sure that we play to the television audience as much as possible.
I see that, and I think I'd love your thoughts on just it's great for the swimmers. The swimmers are going to have a job, but then there's going to be, we have our first 2 women who own pro teams, Tina Andrew and Caitlin Sandino own opposing teams, but they're the first, I read, the first 2 female pro teams. Now we're talking against baseball and basketball and football, so we've got that in swimming. They're going to need coaches, so we're going to have pro coaches, not college coaches anymore, pro coaches, not high school coaches, not USA coaches, pro coaches, pro assistant coaches. We're going to need announcers. We're going to need commentators. So we're going to need podcasts that talk to these pros. And so I think it's really a huge horizon out there. And have you thought about that?
Well, many times. I have my own ideas on how I would do it, and it's too long to get into. But I don't know anything. But I think that the amount of professionalism that has come into the sport has been astounding over the last year, especially. And it can do nothing but help swimming and help swimmers. It also helps that we have true superstars in the sport, and we can thank Michael Phelps. Without Michael, we wouldn't be doing this right now. I can guarantee you there would not be an ISL. There'd be no FINA Championship Series. There would certainly not be the money available to athletes now without Michael Phelps. He is the genesis of all of this. It wasn't Mark Spitz. It wasn't,
Rowdy Gaines.
Rowdy Gaines certainly wasn't Rowdy Gaines. It wasn't that '84 team, even though we had great swimmers.
But you were a name like that.
Matt Biondi. It was Michael Phelps.
Yes, Michael Phelps. And now Katie Ledecky.
Because he transcended the sport.
And now Katie Ledecky. Don't you think so?
Katie Ledecky, absolutely. Greatest female swimmer in history, biggest name ever in the history of the sport on the female side. But I will tell you that Michael has transcended the sport more than anyone. Because I can guarantee you, if you go out on the street and ask 10 people who Michael Phelps is, 9 of them will tell you who he is.
Right.
That he's a swimmer.
Yeah, I just saw somebody got his face tattooed on their thigh. And
so it's, and his name will begin to disappear over time a little bit. But I mean, we know Mark Spitz. So a whole generation will know Michael Phelps for the next 50 years. And again, like Tiger in golf, like Serena in tennis, we owe him a tremendous debt of gratitude, because there's no way we'd be where we are now without him.
We do. Yes. Amen. That is beautiful.
It's true.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Regardless of what you think about him.
No.
I mean, I love him dearly. He's a great friend, and you have your fans and your non-fans of Michael, I guess. But for me, he was the game changer of the sport. Michael was the game changer of the sport, and the game changer of the absolute swimming side of things is the underwaters.
The underwaters, yeah. I love that.
If anything changes sport more than anything else from a technical side, it's underwaters.
Yeah,
it's the fifth stroke. Point. It's the reason why. It's the reason why you see so much fast swimming.
And that's innovation. This is a quick post-interview insert for those of you who may not know what underwaters are. They are described as the fifth stroke, and what Rowdy and I are talking about is underwater dolphin kicking off the wall. So if you notice, swimmers will stay underwater for as long as they can. The maximum limit is 15 meters. But what we're talking about here is powerful underwater dolphin kicks off of turns and starts. And that has changed the sport of swimming because it's very fast to swim underwater. I have two quick last questions.
Mm-hmm.
Second to last question is, if we have a listener out there that's a non-swimmer that just is getting into the brain of Rowdy Gaines, who's this champion, successful athlete, successful businessman, and they have a big goal out there that they want to achieve, whatever that is, raising a family, writing a book, losing 20 pounds, just accomplishing a big goal for themselves. What advice would you give?
Kelly, I'm so full of cliches. That's the problem.
That's okay.
You're looking for an answer that is so
Repetition is the
philosophical
mother of
and so cerebral, and I'm just so not cerebral when it comes to a question like that. I am literally like a person that says, don't give up. I know it's so simplistic when you say that.
I love it.
But I am living proof that dreams come true. I started swimming when I was 17. I tried out for 5 sports before I went out for swimming. Football, baseball, basketball, golf, and tennis in that order. My first 2 years of high school. We started high school in 10th grade. I got cut in every single one of those sports. But I never thought about giving up. I never thought about, I'm not good in sports, I forget about it. Swimming was next. And if it wasn't going to be swimming, then I literally went to the library the day I went out for the swim team and studied up on track and field because I figured I'm probably going to get cut in swimming. So I wanted to see what the next sport in line was to try out for. So it was track and field. So that was a long answer to your short question and my simplistic answer, but you can never give up on your dreams because my belief is we were all put on this earth for a very specific purpose. I don't know what that purpose is, and sometimes people don't realize their purposes until much later on in life. It may be 60, it may be 80, who knows? But you can never give up.
I love it.
And
I love
again,
it. No, that's perfect. And that's why that was part of your book that I didn't know. Like I said, I've known you for, 30, 40 years. Yeah. I didn't know that part of you having tried out for all those sports and didn't start swimming. I didn't know you didn't start swimming until you were 17. So
I knew how to swim.
Yeah, right. And you swam around Florida on the lakes.
I learned how to swim before I learned how to walk.
But that's what I read in Rowdy Rising.
Yeah.
I love that. So that's a great book. So my last question is, and you don't even have to answer it if you think you've said everything you need to say, but I just always like to ask, is there anything that you would like to have listeners know about you or tell or say or promote or what you're most excited about?
Sure.
Yeah.
I want to say one thing as far as promotion. I don't have anything to promote, but the most important thing is if you have children and if you have grandchildren, I'm begging you to put them in swim lessons. Because drowning is a literal epidemic in our country, and if there's a platform that I've had over the last 20 years, it's eradicating drowning, which will never happen, obviously, but to educate the public that literally swim lessons save lives. I know that's, again, oversimplistic, but it's really important to remember, especially if you live around water, even if you don't, but especially if water is part of the fabric of who you are, like it is for me in Florida. The cure is swim lessons. It's not like cancer or heart disease or Alzheimer's, all tragedies. I mean, complete tragedy. None of us have ever been... Nobody, I don't know anybody that hasn't been touched by cancer, obviously, Kelly, So, but it's hard to find a cure for those.
Right.
We're working on that.
Right.
But there is a cure for drowning.
Right.
And it's swim lessons. So
I love it. That's a great thing.
Put your kids in swim lessons.
You have to go to swim practice. You better get out of here. So thank you so much for your time. It's been awesome. You're just such an inspiration.
Thank you. Enjoyed every minute of it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
See you in the pool.
See you in the pool. So Maria, what do you think?
Rowdy is really as amazing a person as I've always heard. I loved the interview. And he is incredibly passionate about swimming. And I loved how he talked about passion being more important than knowledge, which, I think you have to be knowledgeable, and that's part of being a champion. And of course, he is very knowledgeable, but he said that, it was his passion that got him his job and keeps his job, because people love to hear that. People are attracted to that. So I thought it was an amazing interview. What are some of your takeaways, Kelly?
Yes, Maria, that was my number one. I actually wrote down 4 in case, again, we duplicated on that. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, I loved the quote, which is, I don't know as much about swimming as 90% of the people that would like to do this, but you can't deny my passion. And so, I feel like we always talk about in this podcast how you take what athletes do and what they've learned, and you transfer it into real life. And so I have a story that so correlated when he said that. And it was so, first of all, just authentic. And like I said at the top of the show, humble, to be this guy that's, got all his accolades, and to have called 7 Olympic Games to say, hey, 90% of the people, know more about what I'm doing, but I got the passion. So, when I came out of my coaching career, based on a family tragedy, I was the head women's swimming coach at the University of South Carolina. I had a great year, was building momentum in my team, did not plan to leave coaching, but, we lost our beautiful sister-in-law, Rebecca, to suicide, which was a real
Terrible
family tragedy, and that will be another podcast. But so I just threw everything aside and came home to help my brother and his 3 kids. They were 5, 6, and 8 at the time. And after I spent about a year there, just, doing baths and soccer games and helping with meals and getting things back online, I looked up and I said, I need a job. So I had been flying to recruit somebody out of California from South Carolina, and I sat on a long plane flight next to the human resources director for Pfizer Pharmaceuticals. Lucky me. And he'd asked me what I made as a coach, and he gave me his business card, and he said, hey, you want to make a lot more than a swim coach? Call me if you ever want a job. So I was scrambling around and looking for that card. Where's that card? I need a job. And so I called him up. He remembered me, and he was not the interviewer at all. But I went to the interview, and I interviewed with the regional manager, actually a guy named Carl Banks. And they flew me to, I called him, and they said, yeah, we've got a position in your area. Can you fly up tomorrow? So I flew up the next day. And the regional manager called me the day after my interview, and he said, you're not our typical hire, but I loved your enthusiasm. He called it a fire in my belly. And then I think you've heard this story before. So at the welcome, like at the education week where I met the vice president of sales. So you go through, you have your human resources director got me an interview with my district manager, who was awesome. And then I had to go to the regional manager. Then once you're in, I had a dinner with the VP. And so he said, oh, nice to meet you, Kelly. So what's your background? I said, well, I was a swimmer and I was a Division I head coach. And he looked at me and he said, well, that's kind of a stretch to get into pharmaceutical sales. And he had a real scowl on his face. And I just thought, what a negative response, number one, but that I had gotten the job because I was enthusiastic. I didn't know the ins and outs. I didn't really even know what pharmaceutical sales was, but they trained me, and I, ended up being one of their top performers. And I certainly, that guy had to eat a little crow, but I feel like that is something that's so important for listeners to know, that, if there's something out there that you are passionate about, but you're afraid you just don't have the deep skills for it, you may not need it. I mean, enthusiasm goes a long way. And I think it's one of those underestimated character traits that, is present in champions. What do you think, Maria?
I completely agree with that. And I think people can become, I like the title of the show is enthusiasm rather than passion, because people, I believe that lots of times people think that a passion is something that bubbles up in your belly, whereas enthusiasm is something that you can choose. So, I guess one of the things that I loved that Rowdy said, he didn't say these exact words, but this is what I heard. I heard him say, I choose to be enthusiastic about swimming and about calling swimming races. I love swimming. And I choose to be enthusiastic about my family. And, these are the two things that I am enthusiastic about. My story on that is we can choose to be enthusiastic and grow a passion for things. When I was a young mother, I was bored stiff. I thought I was going to be so crazy about my kids and, goo, and I was going to love it. And I remember sitting in the floor one day just crying, thinking, I hate this. It's not that I hated my kids. It's just that I thought it was horribly boring being a mother and interacting with people who couldn't really talk to you. And through talking to some people, especially my sister, she said, you can choose to be enthusiastic about this, and you can choose, basically to be good at this and be the best mother that you can be. And I thought, yeah, I don't have to just go with this feeling of ennui and boredom and and irritation. I can say, no, this is my choice for now. I'm going, not forever, but for now, I'm going to be the best mother I can be. And I'm going to, that doesn't mean I sat on the floor and played with my kids every day, but I started to get educated and talk to other people and tried to turn, this time in my life, around by choosing every day to be enthusiastic about being a mother. And so I've heard lots of people say, "Oh, I don't like this or I don't like that." Well, you can make a choice on that. And I think Rowdy is someone who has said, he loves swimming and he's passionate about swimming. He swims every day. And he was an incredible champ. But he said, I had tunnel vision, which just means that I looked at the prize and I went for it.
Yes. I think that is great. And I do love how you differentiated between passion, which kind of bubbles up in you, and then enthusiasm, which you can actually give yourself the why. When he said tunnel vision, he said, what is the value? What is the why? And so I do not know where this quote comes from, but it is so perfect for enthusiasm. And I don't even think it's a quote. It's kind of a little wordplay, but the last 4 letters of enthusiasm are IASM, and those can stand for I am sold myself. Yeah. So, I think that you must be sold on something to be enthusiastic about it. So you sold yourself on the idea that these are my beautiful kids and the value that I'm bringing by being their mother. I'm sold. I'm enthusiastic. I didn't have any enthusiasm for pharmaceutical sales. But once I went through their training and I saw the benefits of, the lives that these drugs changed, boy, I was enthusiastic, and I would go into those doctors' offices. I was sold myself. So I think that you have to be sold yourself to be enthusiastic. Rowdy's obviously sold on swimming, not a hard sell probably for him. He's sold on his family. So, that's something that is I just love those last 4 letters of enthusiasm meaning that.
Yes. You've said that before, and I want to write it down because that is exactly what it is. And he says he sold himself on swimming, and then his calling swimming also, he's selling it to others, especially at the Olympics. And he made that point in his interview. People who are listening are tuning in, don't know anything about swimming. They want to hear about these people, and I'm going to tell them about these people, and I'm going to explain, what the backstroke flags are for and so forth. So once you're sold yourself, then selling others is easier.
Absolutely.
And people say, oh, he's just passionate. Well, he's made a choice to be sold himself and to sell others.
Yes.
And it's not something that he's just lucky. Oh, well, he's lucky. I think that's what people, for me, that's an important takeaway, that you can choose your enthusiasm. If you're lucky and you have a natural passion that bubbles up and you go for that. But if you're in your life and you happen to be a bricklayer, well, you can choose to be enthusiastic about that and be the best bricklayer you can, or move on to something that you can be enthusiastic about.
Yes, I totally agree with that. And one of the other takeaways that I loved from Rowdy's interview was his talking about being really enthusiastic and then needing to recover. So,
yeah.
I think when I first set up this interview, which, like I said in the interview, Rowdy's been on the road and I've been really trying to get him on the other side of the microphone. I finally did. But I had kind of always been under the impression that Rowdy was just always enthusiastic, like that he just walked around like that 24/7. And so that was the kind of the surprising part, that he does, have ebbs and flows, and that really made him seem more authentic and human, and just like he does. I mean, he's out there, he's enthusiastic, but that it's okay, and that, we've talked about rest and relaxation and how important it is. But I love that he recovered after those high energy periods, and that, we need to allow ourselves that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I like that too. He said after calling the meet, he had to go home or go back to his hotel room and just have some downtime. And it is, I think when we see somebody like Rowdy or other champions, we only see when they're on, and we don't see all this, we don't see the downtimes when they're creating the energy that they can be on for, or all the discipline and work behind it. We can tend to think, oh, well, they have something I don't have. And I would disagree. I think Rowdy has created something in his life by hard work and consistency, and he protects it, obviously, by taking what rest and relaxation he needs so that he can be on.
I love it. I have one more takeaway. Do you have any other takeaways from the Rowdy interview?
No, go ahead.
So I liked kind of the wrap on the commonalities that he saw as that champions have, which are responsibility, kind of that dedication. I'm all in. I think that's important for us to be whatever we want to achieve, that we're really committed, that we're all in. He reiterated teamwork, which we talked about with Michael Andrew and his father, and I'm sure we'll do another one on teamwork. And then I loved his taking risks, just his willingness to take risk, even though he did say in his own business life he's not been as bold as maybe he was in his athletic career. But those three things, like just being dedicated, having teamwork, and taking risk, I think were the commonalities that he saw in champions.
Yeah, I like those too. I loved that he was honest about the sort of desire to start a team, but that it was something that he wasn't ready to take the risk, even though he believed that taking risks was part of being a champion. And I think that's another thing that we can just sort of emphasize, that people like Rowdy and other champions can seem so brave and so, like they're always out there, throwing it out and trying new things. Even Kelly, listening to you talk about wanting to stand up and sing the national anthem, I'm thinking, but I know that there are things that you are afraid of still, that you still haven't done, that maybe you would like to do. So I loved that Rowdy was able to show us his front side and his back side.
Yes.
The inside, or
yes.
Inside maybe is better.
That is a great point, Maria. And I like the little, I don't know if people heard it, but it's like almost a little whisper that he said, I've never told anybody this. So we got an exclusive that he wanted to start a swim school, which is different than a team, which
okay.
You, my little fellow non-swimmer, but a swim school tied into one of his other passions, which I heard enthusiasm for, which I know he's sold on, was promoting safe swimming, safe keeping getting people to learn how to swim, to
Yes.
help
that's
with
right.
drownings.
That's right.
So that's what a swim school does. And I think I can see those two tying in, and maybe something that we're going to see from Rowdy in the future. Who knows? But yeah, I loved.
Do it, Rowdy. Do it. Do it.
Yeah, do it. You can do it. But that is such a great point, that you think someone with his success level, his confidence level, would just blast out the Rowdy Gaines swim school, and but I love that we got the exclusive there. That is, I've never told anybody this, but yeah, and certainly his enthusiasm for helping kids learn to swim would tie into that one. So, anything else before we move on to action items?
Well, I've already sort of talked, I think, about my action item a little bit, but I'd love to sort of elucidate it more clearly. And that is, well, that don't let yourself off the hook if you don't think you have some kind of a special gift or passion. Like he talked about going through all the different sports before he found swimming. And, I think I have spent a lot of my life waiting for myself to become passionate about something. and what's happened is I've chosen things to become passionate about, and then my enthusiasm and my passion has grown for those. So I think my action item is, if you don't feel passionate about something, pick something in your life and start aiming for it, and do like Rowdy says, have tunnel vision, have consistency, have discipline, take a responsibility for moving in that direction and becoming good at that, and your enthusiasm and your passion will grow.
Great stuff, Maria. Yeah, and mine is a similar but a little different twist on it, is taking that I am sold myself, which is the value that Rowdy commented about. So, you want to be more passionate about your work or your relationship or, whatever goal you might have. That what can you do to prove to yourself that that's bringing value, or that you're sold yourself? What can you do? Because sometimes you just really have to look at the value that you're bringing. And I have to say, there were many days that I would go out the door to sell pharmaceuticals, and I just needed enthusiasm. And then I would just remind myself that I was helping people get well, and that, I look at stories of that. And so what value are you bringing? Can you sell yourself on it? And then the enthusiasm will it just grows. It's just like, one step leads to 2, leads to 4. And then you look back and you're like, wow, yeah, I've done that.
Yeah, I think that's right. And again, I think just this concept of pointing towards something, and like you say, and then looking back at, where you've come and say, okay, I've done that. That's excellent. It was a great interview. Thank you. Thanks so much to Rowdy for taking the time to meet with us.
Yeah, it was just awesome to get to sit down with him. So that is going to be a wrap on the show, and we are just so grateful you spend this time with us each week. And if you do like us, please subscribe to Champions Mojo on YouTube and leave us a review on iTunes, and we will see you next week.
Yes, thanks again. And be sure to reach out if you have extra ideas or comments. We'd love to hear from you and interact with you. Thanks so much for listening.
This week's quote of the week comes from us from Winston Churchill. Success consists of going from failure to failure without losing enthusiasm.
We are so grateful that you spent this time with us today, and we hope that you heard something that inspired, motivated, and educated you. Signing off for myself and my champion co-host, Maria Parker, we hope you'll join us again soon, and we know you can be a champion. Thank you for listening, and please see below for a copy of the show notes for any links or important information that we've referenced here.
You've been listening to the Champions Mojo podcast, designed to make you feel inspired, motivated, and educated. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Play. Also visit championsmojo.com to learn more.